The first time I saw the fence, my jaw nearly hit the dirt. It wasn't just a small encroachment or a neighborly mistake. Not as was a bold, ugly chain-link monstrosity that cut straight across the north edge of my ranch. The posts hammered deep into soil my family had worked for generations. At the gate hung a shiny padlock and a smug little sign that read, HOA property. Trespassers will be fined. I felt the blood drain from my face, quickly replaced by a fire that surged in my chest. This was my land recorded, surveyed, deeded since my great-grandfather bought it after the Civil War, and some petty HOA had just fenced it off like it was theirs. Before I could even process the gall of it, there she came, Karen. Heavy set, arms crossed, chin tilted with that sneer that always made neighbors shrink back. She waddled down the gravel path, clutching a clipboard like it was the Constitution. "You're trespassing," she declared, as if she were a sheriff from the old frontier. "This land has been rezoned into HOA common space. You'll need to pay monthly rent if you wish to continue using it." My vision tunneled. Rent. On my land. I almost laughed in her face, but rage strangled the sound in my throat. "Lady, you've got 10 seconds to explain yourself before I rip this fence out with my tractor," I growled. Karen didn't flinch. In fact, she smiled an oily, hateful thing. "Go ahead and try. We'll fine you $10,000 for destroying HOA property. And if you don't pay, we'll foreclose. You don't own the community. We do." Her words sliced through me like barbed wire. She wasn't bluffing. She believed every lie spilling out of her mouth. Neighbors had told me she'd gotten drunk on power before, harassing families over garden colors or Christmas lights. But this was different. This was theft. What Karen didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had anticipated a stunt like this. The HOA had been sniffing around my ranch for months, eyeing the open fields as if they were theirs for the taking. They sent surveyors who conveniently misplaced boundaries, inspectors who claimed my barn was a code violation, even lawyers who sent letters demanding I integrate into their association. Each time, I shoved the papers back in their faces, armed with the one thing they couldn't fight: history. My deed, older than their entire subdivision, signed and sealed by the county courthouse long before their bylaws ever existed. But this fence, this brazen theft, was the moment I decided to stop playing defense. That night, under the porch light, I pulled out every document I had. The original deed, the tax records, the state's conservation easement that had placed my ranch under protected agricultural use. And, as luck would have it, I had one more card to play: my cousin Marissa, a property rights attorney who had spent her career burying HOAs in court. When I sent her the photos of the fence, her response came fast and sharp. They just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Let's bury them. The next morning, I walked out to the fence line with Marissa at my side. Karen was already there, waving her clipboard, pretending to be in charge. "Good," she said smugly. "You brought your lawyer. Saves us time." But Marissa only smirked, unfolding the deed like a battle flag. "You fence private land," she announced loud enough for the gathering neighbors to hear. "You've committed trespass, theft, and attempted extortion. My client doesn't owe you a dime. In fact, by the end of this, you'll be paying him." Karen's face twitched, but she tried to rally. The HOA board voted unanimously to seize this parcel for community use. "It's legal." Marissa's laugh was cold and cutting. "An HOA can't vote away a deeded property right. That fence isn't legal, it's evidence. And you, ma'am, are finished." The crowd stirred, whispers crackling like fire through dry grass. For years, Karen had cowed them with threats of fines and foreclosures. But now they saw her being challenged in broad daylight. A neighbor even pulled out his phone, recording as Marissa held up the deed for everyone to see. Karen sputtered, "That's forged. This land belongs to the HOA." But her voice cracked, and for the first time, doubt spread across her features. I leaned in close, my voice low and steady. "You wanted rent. You're about to pay more than you can imagine." Karen blinked, confused, but I turned away, mounting my tractor. With a roar, I drove straight toward the fence. The crowd gasped, but Marissa raised her hand calmly. "Do it. It's his right." The chain link snapped like twigs as the tractor plowed through. Post toppling, padlock shattering under the blade. The crowd erupted, some cheering, some filming, all witnessing the moment the spell of Karen's control broke. She shrieked, stumbling forward. "Stop. That's HOA property." But her words were swallowed by the sound of metal collapsing, her empire crashing with it. And that was only the beginning. The dust from the tractor still hung in the air when Karen's shrieks broke into hysterics. She stomped toward me, her face blotched red, fists shaking like she could physically claw back control. "You'll pay for this," she screamed, her voice cracking. "The HOA owns this neighborhood, and you can't just destroy our property." The words were almost laughable coming from her mouth as twisted pieces of her illegal fence lay scattered around her feet. Marissa stepped forward, calm as a blade drawn in daylight. "Correction," she said firmly, holding up the deed. "This neighborhood was built around his land. The HOA never owned 1 inch of it. Every post you planted, every demand for rent, it's all unlawful trespass. And we have more than enough evidence." The neighbors, who had gathered at the edge of the field, let out a collective murmur. Many of them looked stunned, realizing the rules Karen had weaponized for years were powerless against the truth of a deed older than their cul-de-sac dreams. But Karen couldn't let go of her delusion. "I'll take you to court," she spat. "I'll drain you with fees until you can't fight back. That's what happens when you mess with me." Her arrogance was almost impressive, like she truly believed her threats still carried weight. Marissa, however, smiled like a chess player who knew checkmate was inevitable. "You won't be draining anyone. In fact, by the time we're done, you'll be lucky if you can afford postage stamps." The twist came faster than even I expected. 2 county deputies arrived, lights flashing, having been called by one of the neighbors. At first, Karen lit up, thinking backup had arrived for her cause. She waddled toward them, waving her clipboard in the air. "Officers, arrest him. He just destroyed HOA property with a tractor. This is criminal." The deputies glanced at the wreckage, then at Marissa, who calmly handed them the deed and the conservation easement papers. Their eyes scanned the documents, their expressions shifting from neutrality to quiet recognition. One deputy turned to Karen. "Ma'am, this is his land. That fence was placed illegally. You and your HOA have committed trespass. If he wants to press charges, we'll take your statement in the back of the cruiser." The look on Karen's face was priceless shock melting into outrage, then fear as the neighbors started laughing, clapping even. For years she had called law enforcement on them for the smallest imagined slight. But now it was her turn to taste the bite of her own medicine. She sputtered, "This is corruption. You're all against me. I was trying to protect property values." The deputies weren't moved. One of them said flatly, "Protecting property values doesn't mean stealing land." That's not how the law works. Within a week, the lawsuit was filed. Marissa moved quickly, suing not only Karen but the entire HOA board for trespass, damages, and attempted extortion. The story hit the local paper and spread fast. Rancher battles, HOA over land grab, read the headline. By the time the first hearing arrived, cameras lined the courthouse steps. Karen strutted in, trying to look confident, but her swollen pride was unraveling thread by thread. Inside, the judge wasted no time cutting through the noise. He looked over the deed, the video footage of the fence being built without consent, and the testimony of neighbors who had seen Karen boasting about taking over my property. His ruling was scathing. The HOA had no authority over my ranch. The fence was unlawful, and all attempts to demand rent were fraudulent. This was a blatant abuse of power, the judge said sternly, and the court will not tolerate it. The hammer fell hard. The HOA was ordered to pay restitution for damages, cover my legal fees, and issue a public apology. On top of that, Karen herself was slapped with personal liability for spearheading the scheme. Her face went pale as the dollar amounts were read tens of thousands she didn't have, obligations that would follow her for years. The fallout was immediate. HOA members who once cowered under her rule turned on her overnight. At the next board meeting, they voted her out unanimously, their voices sharp with anger. "You embarrassed us," one man snapped, "and you almost bankrupted us." Karen tried to shout them down, but no one listened anymore. The queen of fines and threats was dethroned in the very hall she once controlled. Her downfall didn't stop there. News outlets kept running the story, turning her name into a cautionary tale. Online, memes spread of her standing in front of the broken fence with captions like, "When you build on land that isn't yours," and "Karen's rent collection agency, closed forever." What she thought would cement her control had instead destroyed her reputation. Meanwhile, the ranch thrived. Without the HOA's shadow looming, neighbors began to treat it as a gathering place again. Families brought their kids to see the cattle. Teens volunteered for weekend cleanups, and even the elderly found peace walking the trails. What Karen tried to seize became the very symbol of freedom in the community. The best moment came months later when the County Historical Society awarded the ranch an official marker, declaring it protected heritage land. Standing before the plaque, I saw Karen in the crowd, her face tight with bitterness as cameras clicked. She had come hoping to sneer, but all she could do was watch as the community she tried to dominate celebrated the land she tried to steal. As she shuffled away, clutching papers for yet another doomed appeal, I realized she wasn't just beaten. She was irrelevant. Her threats meant nothing. Her power was gone, and her empire of fines and fences had collapsed into dust. And so the ranch stood tall, not just as my family's legacy, but as a beacon for anyone who ever felt bullied by those who hide behind rules and clipboards. Karen fenced me in, but in the end, she only built her own cage. So what do you think? Was it justice that Karen's wallet and reputation paid the ultimate price? Or should she have faced an even harsher punishment for trying to steal land that was never hers?